you arrived in the great dark with a symphony. Your ships were loud. They sang with engine wash and crackling comms. Your colonies were even louder. You brought rock music and opera. You brought shouting debates and laughing children. You filled the silent corners of space with vibrant, chaotic noise. It was the sound of life itself. The masters of this galaxy disagreed. They were the Elder Ones, beings of immense age and cold logic. They saw your noise not as life, but as a sickness, an impurity in the perfect silence of the void. They had watched civilizations rise and fall, always brought low by passion and conflict. The elders believed emotion was a flaw, a chaotic variable in the grand equation of existence. They did not greet you with warships. They did not send ambassadors. They sent a single, simple decree, the law of quiet compliance. It spread across all networks instantly. There would be no more unauthorized broadcasts, no more music above a certain decibel, no more public gatherings of emotional nature. Your beautiful noise was now illegal. You were to become quiet, orderly, predictable. The elders saw it as a kindness, a necessary correction to save you from yourselves. You saw it as the end of everything you were. You tried to argue. You tried to protest. But you were talking to a wall of crystal and starlight. Their answer was always the same: silence. The first world to fall quiet was New Harmony. One moment, its cities rang with a million voices. The next, there was only a soft, regulated hum. The elders deployed their dampening fields. They were invisible waves of absolute order. They didn't just mute sound. They muted the very will to create it. Laughter died in the throat. A cry of anger became a quiet sigh. Your vibrant colonies began to wither. They fell into a gray and dreamless slumber. The bright colors of your art faded from the walls, replaced by muted tones of approved efficiency. The playgrounds fell silent. The dance halls became storage facilities. Hope itself became a regulated commodity, fading into a soft, managed hum. The universe felt muffled. Life continued, but it was a hollow imitation. You still worked in the factories and the star farms. You still raised families. But the fire was gone. Conversations were brief and functional. People moved with a slow, deliberate purpose. There was no joy. There was no sorrow. There was only compliance, a long, unending stretch of quiet obedience. Your children were born into this quiet world. They never heard a lullaby. They never learned the thrill of a shouted game. They were taught that silence was safety, that emotion was danger. Your history was rewritten. Your songs and stories were erased, labeled as relics of a primitive, chaotic past. The elders were thorough. They pruned your entire culture. Some tried to remember. Grandparents would secretly hum old tunes to their grandchildren, a forgotten melody shared in a soundproofed room. But it was a losing battle. The dampening fields were subtle. They wore you down over generations. They made you forget the vibrant person you used to be. You became a ghost in your own life, haunted by the memory of a song you could no longer name. This was the great peace the elders promised. A galaxy free of conflict, a civilization perfected by logic, but it was the peace of a graveyard. Your spirit was being buried under a mountain of quiet. And for a long time, you let it happen. The will to fight had been leached away. The spark of defiance had been gently, efficiently, and completely extinguished. Then, something new began in the deep darkness. It started in the Oort clouds of forgotten systems. It traveled along the maintenance channels of ancient satellites. It was a sound so faint, it was almost nothing. A whisper on a frequency no one had used in centuries. A frequency the elders, in their infinite wisdom, had deemed irrelevant. They were wrong. It was a simple melody. Just a few notes repeated over and over. A sequence discovered by a lonely asteroid miner. He was tinkering with an old comms unit, trying to filter out the star-born hiss for some peace. Instead, he found a signal, a secret tune hidden beneath the noise of the cosmos. It was the first new song in 100 years. The melody spread, not like a broadcast, but like a secret passed from hand to hand. The miner shared it with his sister on a nearby station. She shared it with her crew. They shared it with their contacts on other worlds. The file was small. The frequency was obscure. It moved through the cracks in the Elders' perfect system. It was a digital ghost haunting their machine. Hearing it for the first time was like a jolt of electricity. For those born in the quiet, it was a revelation. It was a sound filled with an alien warmth, an emotion they had never been allowed to feel. For those old enough to remember, it was a painful memory, a reminder of all that had been lost. It was the sound of defiance. It was the sound of hope. And it was just the beginning. The whispers grew. Others began to add to the melody. A harmony here, a percussive beat there, all transmitted on the same hidden channels. It became a collaborative project across a dozen worlds, a secret orchestra playing in the dark. It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be. It was a promise, a sign that humanity was not yet dead, just sleeping. You had to be careful. The Elders' wardens were everywhere. Their sensors were impossibly sensitive. But they were looking for loud declarations of rebellion. They were scanning for anthems and battle cries. They were not looking for a lullaby, a quiet tune hidden in the background radiation of space. It was a joke of cosmic proportions. The galaxy's most wanted criminals were a secret choir. The song had no name. It was just called the signal, or the tune, or sometimes the whisper. It meant something different to everyone. To a child, it was a mystery. To a soldier, it was a call to arms. To an old woman, it was the memory of a dance. It was proof that you could not legislate the soul. You could not silence the heart. Even in the deepest quiet, someone would eventually start to hum. The whispers were not enough. A secret song could not free a galaxy. You all knew it. The quiet rebellion was a comfort, but it was not a weapon. Someone had to take the next step. Someone had to turn the whisper into a shout. That person was a woman named Ilara. She lived on a desolate moon orbiting a gas giant, a forgotten speck of rock called Caliban's Rest. Ilara was a historian. She had access to the old archives, the ones the Elders had locked away but not yet destroyed. She spent her life studying the forbidden past. She listened to the ancient recordings of your lost music. She felt the power in the voices of your ancestors. She knew what had to be done. The galaxy needed to remember what a true voice sounded like. She found an old deep space transmitter, a massive dish left over from the first wave of expansion. It was a relic, obsolete and powerful. It took her 2 years to repair it, to bypass the Elder-mandated governors on its systems. She didn't tune it to the secret frequencies. She aimed it at the main channels, the ones the Elders monitored constantly. She wanted them to hear. She wanted everyone to hear. Then, she sang. It was not a battle cry. It was a lament, a song of profound sorrow for all that was lost. Her voice was untrained but clear. It soared out from that desolate moon. It cut through the regulated hum of the network. It was a voice filled with love and grief and a terrible, defiant hope. For the first time in a century, a human voice filled the space between worlds. The reaction was instantaneous. On 1,000 planets, people stopped in their tracks. They heard the sound coming from their public address systems, their private comms, the speakers in the silent plazas. They had forgotten such a thing was possible. A single person, singing their heart out to the stars. The song spread faster than any Warden fleet. It was a cascading fire of pure emotion. The elders heard it too. Within their crystalline ships, the unauthorized sound registered as a critical failure, a violation of the fundamental law of the universe. Their response was cold and immediate. They dispatched a Warden fleet, 3 stark white vessels designed for one purpose, to enforce the silence. Their target was the source of the broadcast, the lonely moon of Caliban's rest. The Wardens did not rush. They moved with an unfeeling and absolute certainty. Their ships did not have weapons in the traditional sense. They were armed with silence, projectors that could create a zone of perfect, soul-crushing quiet, a field that could snuff out a star's song and a person's will. They were coming to silence Alara, to make an example of her. But the note had already been played, and it had changed everything. Alara's voice echoed long after the Warden silenced her. Her song was cut short, but not before it was recorded on 1,000,000 devices. Her capture was a tragedy, but her broadcast was a gift. It was a treasure of raw data. Your most brilliant minds began to analyze it. Engineers and physicists who had spent their lives in quiet servitude. They finally had a purpose. They were hunting for a weakness. They focused on the Warden transmission logs. The elders were meticulous record keepers. Their network recorded everything, including their own ship responses. As they studied the data from Caliban's rest, they saw something impossible. Something that should not have happened. When Alara's voice hit a specific pitch, a specific resonant frequency, the Warden ship's dampening fields flickered. For less than a microsecond, they wavered. It was a tiny flaw, an insignificant anomaly in their perfect technology. But it was there. Her voice, her purely organic, emotional voice, had interacted with their machines. It had affected them in a way no weapon ever could. It was not the volume of her song, it was the quality of it. The specific combination of tones, the harmony, the very thing the elders sought to destroy. This discovery changed the nature of your resistance. You were not just fighting a war of attrition. You were now engaged in a war of acoustics. The rebellion moved from hidden radios to secret laboratories. Your people began experimenting. They used shielded rooms and quantum simulators. They played Alara's recording over and over. They isolated the exact frequencies that caused the flicker. You became architects of a new kind of weapon, a weapon made of music. You learned that a single voice was a nuisance, but a chorus, a perfectly structured harmony, could be devastating. Specific chords could disrupt Warden communications. Certain melodic progressions could destabilize their power cores. You were composing the downfall of your oppressors. Your secret choir was now an arms manufactory. It was a strange and beautiful form of warfare. Your greatest weapon was not a bomb, but a symphony. Composers became generals. Singers became soldiers. A well-written melody was more valuable than a fleet of starships. You had to relearn the art that had been stolen from you. You had to rediscover the power of your own voices, all in absolute secret. Your secret labs were places of quiet intensity. People hummed into sensitive instruments. They debated chord structures in hushed whispers. Imagine a choir practice where one wrong note could get everyone executed. It was the most stressful rehearsal in history, but it was also filled with a new and powerful hope. You were no longer just hiding. You were preparing to sing back. You were forging an anthem of defiance. The whispers in the dark grew into a unified chorus. The secret melody shared on forgotten frequencies was no longer enough. You needed to organize, to coordinate. The fragmented pockets of resistance on 1,000 worlds needed to become one voice. The song Ilara sang was your inspiration. The science you discovered was your weapon. Now, you needed an army of singers. The network of whispers evolved. It became a clandestine university of music and physics. Lessons were encoded in streams of mundane data. A shipping manifest might contain the harmonic structure for a new sonic device. A crop report could hide a lesson in vocal control. The elders saw only order and commerce. They did not see the revolution being planned in their own spreadsheets. It was brilliantly subversive. Your defiance now had a rhythm and a beat. Small acts of musical sabotage began to occur. A factory's humming machinery would suddenly shift its pitch, creating a low-frequency resonance that gave the warden overseers a splitting headache. A public transport system's automated announcements would develop a subtle but noticeable melodic tone. Tiny acts of rebellion, little notes of freedom. These were tests, probes to gauge the elders' reactions and refine your techniques. You learned that their technology was powerful but rigid. It was designed to suppress loud, chaotic noise. It was not well equipped to handle complex, ordered harmonies. Your music was like a key that could unlock the cold, logical prison they had built around your galaxy. And you were getting better at turning it. The elders, for their part, were not idle. They knew something was wrong. The perfect quiet of their domain was being disturbed. They could not pinpoint the source, but they felt the change. Their grip on your civilization, once absolute, was now being challenged by an enemy they could not understand. An enemy that fought with beauty instead of bombs. It was a concept entirely alien to their logical minds. Your chorus grew with every successful test. More and more people joined the secret network. They practiced in soundproofed cargo bays. They built resonant devices in shielded basements. They learned the songs of rebellion. A new culture was being born in the shadows of the old. A culture of resistance built on the one thing the elders feared most: the unbridled power of the human heart expressed in song. Your whispers were becoming a roar. The elders responded with an iron fist. They could not find the source of your defiance, so they chose to silence everything. They upgraded their warden fleets. They deployed new, more powerful sonic dampeners. These were not the subtle fields that encouraged compliance. These were weapons of absolute nullification. They could target an entire city block and erase every sound within it. Their prison ships appeared in orbit over your worlds. They were called the silent barges, great, black vessels that drifted without a sound. Wardens would descend and perform random sweeps. They would arrest anyone suspected of sonic treason. A person humming a tune while they worked. A child tapping out a rhythm on a desk. The slightest infraction could earn you a one-way trip to a re-education colony. They tried to capture every note of your rebellion. Public spaces were fitted with acoustic sensors. They monitored every conversation, every footstep. The regulated hum of your cities became a flat, dead tone. The gray of your world deepened. The fear was a constant, quiet pressure. They were trying to make you afraid of your own voice, afraid of the very air you breathed. But you were clever. You learned to hide your music in new ways. You used infrasound and ultrasound, frequencies outside the normal range of their sensors. Your architects of harmony designed devices that could be hidden in plain sight. A simple water purifier could also be a resonant amplifier. A public light fixture could double as a harmonic broadcaster. Your rebellion was all around them, and they still could not see it. The silent barges were terrifying. But they also made the elders' methods clear. They were not gods. They were bullies with advanced technology. Their power was based on fear and control, and their fear was growing. Their increasingly brutal methods were proof of that. They were afraid of your songs, afraid of what those songs represented, that you would not be broken. You fought back in small, meaningful ways. A transport carrying prisoners to a silent barge would suddenly have a critical engine malfunction. A malfunction caused by a sustained, low-frequency hum from a device planted on its hull. A warden's communication system would fill with melodic static during a raid. You were bleeding them with 1,000 tiny paper cuts, 1,000 tiny notes. The war for the galaxy's soul had begun in earnest, and the overture was just beginning. You needed a sanctuary, a place to gather your forces and practice your art, a stage for the coming performance. You found it in a place the elders had long abandoned, a star system designated as a resonant anomaly. It was a place where starborn winds and magnetic fields created a unique acoustic environment. A natural concert hall among the stars, the Kepler-18 system. The system was a physicist's dream and a composer's paradise. It had 3 gas giants and a pulsing neutron star at its core. The interaction of their gravitational forces produced strange and beautiful phenomena. The planet's magnetospheres sang to each other. They created vast, intricate symphonies of charged particles. It was a place where the universe itself was making music. The elders had marked it as chaotic and unpredictable and stayed away. For you, it was perfect. You began moving your best people there in secret. Your composers, your engineers, your most powerful singers. They traveled in shielded ships, on routes that seemed random. They built a hidden base deep within the swirling clouds of the largest gas giant, a place they called the orchestra pit. It was here that you would prepare for the final act. The resonant properties of the system were astounding. A single voice, properly amplified by the planet's magnetic field, could sound like a chorus of thousands. A simple harmony could be shaped and focused, turned into a coherent wave of sonic energy. The system wasn't just a hiding place. It was a weapon, the greatest musical instrument ever conceived. And you were about to play it. Life in the orchestra pit was a strange mix of science and art. Physicists worked alongside sopranos. Audio engineers debated resonant frequencies with tenors. They were all united by a single purpose: to turn their music into a force for liberation. They experimented constantly, learning the system's unique properties, how to use a gas giant storm as a percussive beat, how to use a moon's orbit to modulate a frequency. It was a dangerous place. The system's energies were volatile, but the risk was worth it. Here, you were free. For the first time in generations, you could sing without fear. The base was filled with music, the sound of voices testing their limits, the sound of instruments being tuned, the sound of hope being forged into a weapon. It was a stark contrast to the silent, gray worlds you had left behind. You were not just reclaiming your voice. You were reclaiming your joy. The elders revealed their final, chilling plan. They had grown tired of chasing whispers and echoes. Their attempts to crush your rebellion with force had only made you more creative. They decided on a more permanent solution, one that would end the problem of human emotion forever. They called it the Great Quieting. It was a wave of total mental pacification. The plan was audacious and terrifying. They would use the galactic core itself as a transmitter. They had built a device around the supermassive black hole at the center of everything. A machine designed to send out a single, galaxy-spanning psionic wave. This wave was not designed to kill. It was designed to erase. It would gently wipe clean the emotional centers of every human mind it touched. There would be no anger, no joy, no love, no defiance. Only placid, perfect obedience. You would become living machines. Your consciousness would remain, but your spirit would be gone. You would still work and live, but you would never again feel the urge to sing. It was the elders' ultimate expression of their philosophy. A universe corrected, a galaxy finally brought into perfect, silent harmony. You learned of this plan through a desperate act of espionage. A team of your best agents managed to infiltrate an elder data hub. They downloaded a fragment of the schematics before they were discovered. None of them made it out. But their sacrifice gave you the information you needed. The Great Quieting was not a distant threat. It was imminent. The device was nearly complete. You had months, perhaps only weeks. The news sent a shockwave through your hidden rebellion. The stakes had been raised to an unimaginable level. This was no longer a fight for freedom. It was a fight for the very definition of your species. To lose now meant becoming a hollow echo of what you once were. The fear was immense, but it was not a paralyzing fear. It was a clarifying one. It sharpened your resolve. You now had a clear objective. You could not allow the elders to activate their device. A direct assault on the galactic core was impossible. It was the most heavily fortified location in the known universe. You had only one option, one desperate, improbable strategy. You had to strike at the elders themselves, not their ships or their machines, but their minds. You had to make them feel, and you had to do it before they silenced the galaxy forever.